My name is Rajneesh Day, and I am the editor with APAC News Network.
Please.
We are having this two-day cloud and security conclave over today and tomorrow, and it's being represented by a galaxy of policy-level government decision makers and enterprise-wide decision makers. Today morning, we had an inaugural session where a lot of the government policymakers were present. We had Dr. Muktesh Chandar, IPS, the Special Commissioner Technical Wing of Delhi Police. We had Dr. Sanjeev Kumar Joshi, the Joint Secretary with Ministry of Panchayati Raj. We had Jayesh Ranjan, the Principal Secretary, Electronics and IT of Telangana. We had Manoj Abraham, IPS, Additional DGP of Kerala Police. We had Dr. Nita Verma, DG of NIC. We had B. Sundar, the Special Secretary, Department of Electronics and IT of Andhra Pradesh. We also had Manoj Mishra, the Electronics and IT Secretary of Government of Odisha. And we had a special session with Golok Simli, the CTO of Passport Seva. Also in the morning, after that, we had one session more on the cloud challenges and cloud deployment. And now it's my privilege to introduce a very esoteric set of panelists for the session on emerging cyber threat landscape, how enterprises, defense forces, and law enforcement approach is being taken care of to mitigate the challenges of cyber threats. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce each of the panelists today. It's my special privilege to introduce Mr. Kaiser Khalid, IPS, Commissioner of Police, Railways, Mumbai. Welcome to the show, Mr. Khalid.
Thank you.
Welcome. Then it's my privilege to introduce Dr. Pawan Duggal, Advocate of Supreme Court of India and one of the premier cyber security legal framework specialists. Welcome, Pawan. I think some technical thing he just got. Then I'll welcome Ravi Prakash Mullagudda, Senior Vice President IT of Geo Platforms to the show. Welcome, Ravi.
Hi, thank you.
We have Mohit Gupta, Group CISO of Samvardhana Motherson International Limited. Welcome, Mohit. We have Pallav Ganguly, CISO Generation CSC Limited, as well as a chairman of IEEE COMSOC Kolkata chapter. Welcome, Pallav.
Thank you, Rajneesh.
We have Naseem Haldar, CISO of ACO. Welcome, Naseem.
Hey, thanks.
We have Sandeep Padam, Senior Director, Information Security, Lowe's India. Welcome, Sandeep.
Thank you.
Welcome. And last but not the least, we have Kanishk Gaur, who will be moderating the discussion. Kanishk is the founder of India Future Foundation and one of the premier cybersecurity experts in the country today. So over to you, Kanishk. Now it's your show. So I think Pawan just got disconnected. He will be joining in a few seconds again. So over to you, Kanishk, for the next 1 hour. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajneesh, for that brief introduction. And I welcome our fellow panelists who have taken out time for this interesting session, where we'll be discussing on the emerging threat landscape, how it impacts the safety and security of businesses and also the consumers in India. We have lately seen that there has been an increase in the number of cyber attacks, especially during the time of COVID. And the cyber threat landscape has been changing. So I want to discuss with my panelists today that what are some of the trends which they have seen, impacting the Indian ecosystem. So my first question, it's going to be to the larger panel. I want to get your views. There has been a paradigm shift in the cyber threat landscape in India, and we see that the cyber attacks are getting more and more complex. There has also been increased use of artificial intelligence and machine learning. So what are some of the key trends, you think we have been observing today? So we can start with Mr. Khalid, if you can share your views. and then we can hear from some of our other panelists. You're on mute, sir.
Is it fine
Yes,
now?
please go ahead. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. Now, if you look at the cyber landscape of the country, in fact, the last 4 or 5 years have witnessed a huge surge in the use of, let's say, in the financial market. If you see transactions, the other day, Honorable Prime Minister was also talking of, which is a kind of a non-physical form that has gone up. So this has led a lot of people to use currency and the finances that they have through various mobiles or computer devices, which also opens them to the possibility of hacking and defrauding in various ways. Call it phishing, call it other things. So of late, what we are witnessing is that there has been a major attack on the financial institutions from cyber criminals, and these criminals are mostly located across borders. In fact, anywhere in the country or anywhere in the world. So one is this. Second attempt that we are seeing is to breach our strategic or vital installations and steal data. This would apply to defense. This will apply to our critical things. The third thing that we find is a lot of issues where national security is involved, be it energy security, be it other security, that is also being breached or attempt are being made to be breached. There was some information about our own Aadhaar thing being attempted to be breached. So the data privacy itself is a target. In addition to that, we find a lot of cyber attack on different kind of things, from defacement, from disinformation campaign, from humiliating somebody, creating other things, and all those things. All in all, what I see is that in law there are three things which have got the which are privileged or which are secure. One is your life, second is your resources and assets, which is your property, and third is your dignity. All in all, we are seeing that on all three fronts, we are witnessing a lot of cyber attacks from various players, and with increasing capability, I should say that. And everything which is available in the cyberspace and which concerns these three issues or subjects or broad parameters is under attack. So we see banks being attacked, we see funds being diverted, in fact, stolen, and that overall, if you take the overall amount, that runs in thousands and thousands of crores. I mean, that is a huge thing. Individual level, people are being defrauded one way or the other. And I would include everything which comes through a computer or mobile, through which people are being defrauded, be it a lottery offer, be it a betting issue, be it anything. In fact, a recent trend that we are witnessing is that there are many people who are visiting different websites, including porn websites, and immediately some of them would get mail that you have visited such and such a website, and unless you pay us so much, we are going to publish that thing. So I've seen quite a few number of senior people being subjected to this kind of extortion. So all in all, as we are becoming more computer centric, and we are existing in an information age where technology, and especially cyber technology, becomes the pivot of our life, I think these attacks will continue to increase, because probably this is the safest way to steal your money or defame you or inflict harm onto you, and where the attacker need not confront you physically, and he may not leave traces also, and he may be operating from different borders, from different countries, and we probably may not be having any footprints there also. I'm aware of a case in which a lot of money from a bank was stolen, and money was withdrawn in West Indies. Money was stolen from Pune and it was withdrawn in West Indies. So all in all, this is a situation which is challenging to us, and we need to improve our own skills to confront such things. And we need a lot of international cooperation in this, actually, because cyber is one thing which is without any boundary. So as we exist more in cyberspace, as more and more data is available online, I think these challenges are going to increase. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Khaled. I want to bring in Dr. Pawan Duggal here. Dr. Dugul, Mr. Khalid spoke about the applicability of the international law. In case of cyber attacks which are state sponsored or are done by actors which are backed by state, how does international law comes into the picture? What kind of remediations are available in case it impacts physical lives or it impacts the public infrastructure, the critical infrastructure of India? So, Dr. Dugul, you're on mute. Thank you.
I hope you can hear me. Thanks for
Yes, yes, yes.
giving me this opportunity. Internet has made geography history, and as a result of the same, it's now possible for anyone sitting in any one portion of the world to go ahead and attack computer systems and networks located in another part of the world. That being so, attribution of cyber crimes and cybersecurity breaches becomes one of the toughest challenges facing nations and law enforcement agencies. To complicate the entire scenario is the fact that at the international level, there is no international cyber law in place. There's also no international cyber security law in place. The only thing that we have internationally is the Budapest Convention or the Convention on Cybercrime of Council of Europe. Now that is a only successful example of a working treaty, but that's only on cybercrime. But then it's still like a big boys club. Only 60 nations plus nations have accepted the said convention. 2/3 of the nations across the world have chosen not to go ahead and accept the said the said treaty, primarily because it has a number of provisions which could have an impact upon the national sovereignty or the cyber sovereignty of a nation. So in a scenario like that, the fundamental question is what law applies? There is, age-old wisdom which says that the principles of international law need to be made applicable to cyberspace. However, the United Nations group of governmental experts have been dragging their feet on, and we still don't have unanimous kind of viewpoint amongst the UNGGE that international law applies to cyberspace. Therefore, now the focus has been more on confidence in building measures, focus is more on developing norms and behaviors in cyberspace, and leading by front, as by example, is the Oxford Statement process. We've seen almost about 4 or 5 Oxford statements which have tried to enunciate some of the basic legal principles that need to be followed by state and non-state actors in the context of certain cyber incidents or events in cyberspace. But then the problem is the Oxford statements are only a voluntary or at best only a directory kind of an approach. It's not very mandatory on nations, and therefore nations can choose to ignore the same. So therefore, I think in a scenario like this, we will still be debating for the next few years as to how principles of international law would be applicable to cybersecurity breaches and to cybercrime. But having said that, now the new trend has started coming in. Countries are saying there's a humongous vacuum of policy making or law at the international level in this regard. So they have now increasingly started coming up with new ingenious methodologies. So one of the most preferred and a popular methodology amongst nation states today is to come up with their own distinctive national cybersecurity laws. These laws have been drafted keeping in mind the need for protecting and preserving the cyber sovereignty. But the way these laws are growing in terms of their ambit, in terms of their scope, their applicability, it's amazing. So right now, more and more countries are increasingly inclined towards come up with national cybersecurity laws and try to deal with the vagaries of attribution of internet-related crime via national laws. So there are some intrinsic drawbacks there, primarily so because your national laws can only be applicable within your own territorial boundaries. But despite that, we have countries like China and Vietnam, which have been now coming up with very expanding, ever-expanding definitions and interpretations of cyber sovereignty. Recently, Vietnam came up with its own national cybersecurity law, which for the first time defined in a legislation across the world the concept of national cyberspace. And they have defined the entire internet to actually mean their national cyberspace. So that's yet another way. I see this as nothing but a manifestation of the Antarctic age, where nations were landing onto the Antarctica and putting their flags and saying, that's my territory and that's where my law would apply. We will still see some teething problems and some time period before the principles of international law really crystallize in this direction. But having said that, till such time that happens, each country to their own, they will increasingly have to rely upon the ambit of their national laws for the purposes of attributing cyber criminal activities to cyber actors and for the purposes of taking effective action against the cyber criminals and breaches of cyber security.
Thank you, Dr. Duggal, for those insights, and I'll come back to you on some of those areas. I want to bring in our experts from the financial services market now. I want to call in Mr. Naseem Haldar. Mr. Naseem Haldar, we have seen that the financial services market in India is highly regulated. It has cybersecurity policies, regulations applying, but it also has the fastest adoption of emerging technology. And they face the maximum heat today because the cybersecurity attacks which attack the financial services market has a huge implication on our GDP. So in current scenario, especially during the time of COVID, what are some of the strategies that have been adopted, given there is no international law that applies and you get attacked from state actors or you get attacked from hacking groups which are basically operating outside the Indian territory or working from any other country?
Yeah, it's very relevant question actually. Considering Mr. Khalid and Mr. Duggal, they have but one person is given as the national security level input, and we got input from a legal aspect as well. So now the question is about how exactly you are going to safeguard your economy. It's a business, right? Its economy is going to flourish from this business only. So considering this BFSI sector, yes, it's a big pain point for any BFSI sector. As on date, having only a product like I have as a bank, I have a saving account as a product. I can sell it up. I have as an insurance company, I have a health insurance as a product. I have a auto insurance as a product. But this product,
Mr. Naseem Haldar, my apologies. Your internet connectivity is not that great. So if you can just reconnect, then I'll bring you in again.
Sure.
Nobody's able to understand what you're saying.
Sure.
Yeah. So I'll move on to our next panelist. I want to bring in Commander Sandeep Padam. Commander Sandeep Padam is a veteran. He's currently working for Loe India, but he has worked with the defense forces. But Padam, we've seen that the increased number of cyber attacks from state actors also target our defense establishments, our critical infrastructure, right? And there is no applicability of international law. Mr. Pavan Duggal spoke about cyber laws or cyber policies being made to safeguard the institutions from such cyber attacks. But do you think those policies, norms, or cyber laws are enough, or more needs to be done in this space?
Thanks, Kanishk, for the question. And before I come to the answer, I must say that I must congratulate the organizers for having this event, such a relevant event organized, and of course honored to be a part of this distinguished panelists. So having served in Indian Navy for 20 years and now in corporate for 1.5 years, I think having seen both the sides where everything is everything is a state subject, everything is amenable to attack, everything is a very sort of a juicy target for the adversary, and in a corporate where protecting bottom line is everything. I would say that going by the present trend, so I'm going to use two heavy words, but then I will just decipher it as we go. So this is the world of abstractions and orchestrations, especially since we have been having this summit focusing on cloud. Now everybody, we have seen representatives from state governments, from there, everybody is thinking about moving to clouds and what are the challenges they are facing as they move on to cloud. What are the benefits that they will accrue as they move their infrastructure to the cloud. But what happens is that what is the advantage of cloud is, of course, that it abstracts the lower level complexities and gives you gives you the time, the energy to focus on what you want to do. For example, if government wants to serve the customers, so instead of getting involved into the lower level complexities, you can just serve on creating an application, maybe healthcare or any other application, which will help you to focus on customers and deliver value out of it. And second term I used is orchestration. So orchestration means automating everything. Again, with cloud, creating of resources, scaling up, scaling down, everything can happen with just a small piece of code or a few clicks on the configuration dashboard as you are creating your resources or as you are creating your workflow. So the advantage of functionality is in a way usurped by the fact that the same platform is available to the adversary also. And if we see overall in the internet, the bot traffic, the non-human traffic is something which is overwhelming compared to the human traffic. In fact, more than 60% of the traffic is the bot traffic. So what it means is that most of the attacks, most of the threat vectors which will be which are already there and which will get more evolved as we go into the future are going to be the automation based attacks, automation based threat vectors. And what are they going to attack is one aspect is the vulnerabilities that you may have in whatever you are whatever you're sharing in the public space, whatever has an external IP. And other thing they will be looking at is the important factor of configuration. How do you configure your assets, especially the one which are on cloud, or if it's a mix of on-prem or cloud, whatever. So as soon as they found, even if a cloud, like there was one discussion wherein it was mentioned again that cloud takes care of most of the aspects of security. But what about the fact that if those security parameters are not correctly configured, an adversary, an automated adversary would look at those flaws, which may not be vulnerabilities, it is just a configuration flaw, and then make sure that he can do whatever he wants to do. And coming to the defense forces, again, one major word throughout the summit that I've been attending since the morning is to have a holistic sort of an approach. So what has been happening in the defense was that in the Navy, Army, and Air Force, so they were, as of now, they were working on their own roadmaps, which had little with each other, and there was hardly any convergence in future. But now with this cyber command coming, that is one major step which will ensure that, again, we get that holistic view of the overall picture that we have in the defense forces. And again, it is going to be complex, but it is a right way ahead. And lastly, I would say is that what we need to focus on in government or in defense sector particularly is the factor of agility. Now, this is a world where you take a decision, you do your homework, you take a decision, and you see how your decision implementation is faring results. In case the results are not up to the mark, you change that decision and make sure you have those step-based organizations to make sure that you are able to achieve whatever you have intended for in the future. So this is something all the corporates who are getting into cloud are using successfully, because this is the difference between success, failure. This is the difference between the fact somebody would be able to penetrate your defenses or not. So the which
So I think we've lost Sandeep. So I'll bring in Mr. Ravi Prakash from Reliance Jio Platforms. Mr. Ravi Prakash, we've seen the growth in the volume of cyber attacks is also impacting the telecom infrastructure. How critical is cyber defense for most entities in order to protect themselves and their sensitive information and digital assets today?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for inviting. And it's a privilege to be part of this esteemed panel. Yeah, it's as you know that telco is a critical infrastructure. It is already called out that. Yeah, as you rightly highlighted about the last pandemic scenario and then digitization, transformation, and remote working, whether it is a small, medium, or large scale enterprises, everyone is has to digitize. They have to operate. They have to run the show with the digital solutions. The old days, we will plan only partly, we will plan only some segment, critical segmented. That thought process is getting changed. Now everyone most has to do the digitization. They have to adapt to the latest technologies. They have to move to the cloud transformations. With that, across the footprint is changing. The total footprint is changing. What I can say is, along with the telco, we are doing our best to do all kind of security precautions. What I suggest, what I have in mind, the recommendations mind is awareness is the critical key. Whether people know or doesn't know, continuous awareness is important. And as we are preparing ourselves for the security, cyber security resilience, we should know our inventory. Okay, it is better to prepare an exercise to have an inventory, asset inventory. Earlier it is only asset inventory. Now it has to be your desktops, your laptops, your cloud URLs, your lower endpoint. There are multiple gamut is coming about that because of the remote working, and all the environments has to be exposed, and bring your own devices. Asset inventory is critical, and because the cloud, earlier it was traditional strategies will be having about that. By default in cloud, all the assets will be getting public IP. Public and port IP. The exposure is pretty huge. The new attack vectors is pretty huge. And now because of the digitization, all the solutions are coming towards the customer side. And most of the solutions, because of the agility and user experience, they're going towards the OTP-based authentications. And on their fingerprints, they're able to do lots of transactions. The continuous awareness, and there is lots of frauds are happening, and many people has highlighted about that. On financial side, little lot of frauds, but awareness is the critical. Okay, asset inventory is the critical, and doing the cyber drills. Cyber drills, assuming that we are under the attack, and try to prepare ourselves. That will give the opportunity to upskill ourselves, departments, and preparing about that. What is that we have to invest on it. That is very important, knowing the current dynamics, how they're doing about that stuff. Assuming that I have a rock solid partner or rock solid team, the threat vectors are changing drastically. If you see closely recently, the supply chain attack vectors, those are not, if you go to the vulnerabilities, they are no different from the earlier one. But because of the exposure, those become visible now, and people are targeting right now. Earlier, the way we used to trust many OEM partners like Microsoft, Google, Adobe, all the solutions we used to trust. Now we should have a pinch of salt to not to trust their endpoints also. We have to do the exercise. This will, how to know about that, are we good in from the OT side or from the supply chain side perspective? The way to uncover is by doing the cyber drills, proactive cyber drills, or proactive red team activities on the infrastructure. That will give a right picture without having any bias, without any complaints to the existing teams. Give a free hand, do our best. So we'll come to know where the areas we are good, where the areas we have to improve about that. These are the three things I want to highlight about that: awareness, asset inventory, and upskilling our skills. And yeah, coming to being a telco, we are sitting as a standard practice, localization. Where, irrespective of the business vertical, we are mandating and we are practicing it by having a local presence instead of having spread across. We do get an opportunity to have a service in Singapore. We do get an opportunity to have a service in different across the cloud services provided. But wherever is possibility, I do recommend to have a local presence, so that by having our laws, our policies will be applicable to do the forensic analysis, to influence our partners, to do the post de facto any study or analysis which will be useful to us. And we need to have the additional policies. Now, for example, if you try to spin off a new VM, if you spin off a VM in so-and-so country, it will be very cheaper when compared to India. The policy, we need to have policies. The policy team has to be closely watch out that those rates has to be equally or competitive or better. And if you try to spin off from locally, this will play major advantage because of new startup culture, new from colleges, from youngsters, from the experienced people who want to start their entities. Yeah, it's ROI is very important. How much they are investing about that. Here, when compared to outside, the initial dogfooding, initial penetration is the critical, and everyone want to save the money in the spinning off, in showcasing the value. As a policy, as a company, we have to consciously put a pressure on international, all the cloud providers to have a competitive rates or better rates for our startup ecosystem.
No, absolutely. That's really important, for the organizations to secure themselves today. And you touched upon some very important areas here. I want to bring in Mohit Gupta from Motherson Sumi Group. Mohit, you've seen a superset of information security, operational technology security, and IT security practices related to digital assets being applicable in the sector in which you operate today. Now, what do you think needs to be done to ensure there is convergence, there is coherence, while emerging technology adoption is happening across the paradigm, and there is increased use of IT and OT, and we have also seen there is large attacks which start impacting the IoT and the OT infrastructure first?
Sure. Thank you, Kanesh, for asking this question. I guess that, see, IoT, you talked about IoT, you talked about OT. IT we all had been talking about. Even IoT systems last for many years. I mean, therefore, such systems cannot be treated as install and forget. But I guess since I represent an enterprise, let me talk about the complexity, and then probably we would be able to have a better context. In a manufacturing space, all those people who understand the automotive, we are a conglomerate. We are a conglomerate which has not just one company. There are about 100 odd companies which form a part of this group. We're spread in 41 countries, and we are growing inorganically more than organic means, which effectively means that whenever you acquire a company, you don't just acquire a company, rather their technology as well, their teams as well, their processes as well, which increases the interconnectivity, complexity so far as the hybrid infrastructure is concerned, the federation, which obviously adds to the complexity. We also touched upon the legal aspects and how the regulations are there in a conglomerate like us, especially in Motherson. There are about 100 odd applicable data security and privacy compliances, because if at all you start to talk about these countries, there are state laws as well, which obviously adds to another level of complexity. Now, at one side, we talk about the confidentiality of the data, the integrity of the data, and so on and so forth. But in automotive, especially when we are talking about smart manufacturing, availability becomes very, very important. And that is where I would like to talk about the convergence between OT and IoT. See, in manufacturing, there are two important terms, JIT and JIT. JIT is just in time, which means that OEMs are providing us information just in time, and we should have ready raw material available with us. Within the stipulated time, we should be able to manufacture it, produce it, and then should be able to ship it. If at all we don't do that, there are huge penalties which gets invited. Obviously, no one would like to have it. And the another term is JIS, which is just in sequence, which effectively means that we are to even ship a particular product for a particular model in a specific color with all the specification on the assembly line of a customer in the same sequence. And if we don't do that, again, there are $1 million penalties per hour which gets invited. Now, in such circumstance, obviously the availability becomes very, very important. So all CIA gets converged. Now, assume a scenario wherein we are only taking care of IT security and we do not have any visibility of what is happening on our production floor. How would we deal with that? There are cases wherein, I mean, in all probability, there are OT machines, there are SCADA machines, PLC machines, which are operating on a production floor. They run in silos, but if at all, as we are moving towards Industry 4.0 and even are stepping into Industry 5.0, wherein the predictive analysis has to come in, we do not have a visibility of what is happening on those specific machines. Those automated robots which are manufacturing. If at all there is a malfunction out there, it could lead to a severe damage, not just to a production, but it could also take a human life away. So that is where we have to have a visibility. And unless we start to pull in the data from these OT machines, we again cannot control this, neither in terms of configuration nor in terms of how do we ensure the availability always remains. And that is exactly why do we require this IT and OT convergence. Lately, what we have realized is in India, obviously it is picking up a little late, but slowly and gradually we have started to see our plants also getting automated since OEMs are opening up. But globally, especially in say Germany, in the geos like US, even in Mexico and Brazil, we have started to witness the IT and OT convergence a little more. There are warehouses wherein they're 100% automotive. No person can actually enter into it. All that you could do, which is 1,000 plus square yards, all automated. So if at all we do not have a visibility, again, by IT means in our ERP system, in our application systems, we would not be able to control our business. Now, talking about cybersecurity, I guess that all we know is that there had been a struggle in whole industry. Last 2 years, obviously there is a menace, and the velocity with which we have seen these cyber crimes rising up is literally giving us nightmares. Even enterprises who are struggling with production, with businesses, are to spend out of the budget $1 million in newer technology adoptions and in elevating our overall security posture by streamlining the processes. Obviously, it's a challenge, and I guess that it is continue to grow. It is only a matter of us we keeping ourselves structured, we keep our people motivated, and make sure that we put right processes, technology, and people in place so that we are able to reach the right goal and support the business. Yeah.
Thank you. I want to bring in Mr. Pallab Ganguly. Mr. Pallab Ganguly, we've also seen that the Indian ecosystem has been under attack from state actors, especially the power sector, right? And it comprises of a lot of SCADA systems, OT systems, which so far remain insecure. There have not been any policy norms or frameworks, cybersecurity frameworks, which would allow assessments to be done, and especially the support which is there from the OT companies with respect to security has not been that great. Given the current scenario, how do you protect the power systems in the country, and how do you safeguard the critical infrastructure? Because power system, again, is part of the critical infrastructure, and it has direct impact on national security.
Right. Good afternoon, friends. And I'm privileged to attend this particular eminent panelists panel. And I do show my regards to the APAC team, APAC network team. Well, as per the question raised by Ganesh, is very pertinent. And till now, I've been hearing Dr. Duggal, Mr. Khaled, Dr. Khaled, and Mohit. Mohit also spoke of the CIA triad and all. But since we are from the power utility section, we have many generating stations and also a DISCOM. So the main challenge from a power utility is that actually it goes the other way around. It is not the CIA triad, but it is the AIC triad. That is, availability comes first, then integrity, and then confidentiality. And now, for the last 1.5 years, we are thankful to Ministry of Power that they have come up with the policies regarding the sharing of the critical information infrastructure and the cyber crisis management plan. That has to be shared. The CCMP has to be shared with the SAT thermal for the generating station and for the DISCOM SAT distribution, and then onward to be given to CISO Ministry of Power for final approval. This is an initiative being taken from Ministry of Power. Apart from that, the critical information infrastructure part 1, part 2 document has to be shared with the NCIPC. It is to be vetted by NCIPC under NTRO. And also, you know that SATIN has come up under the Ministry of Information and Electronics Technology. They have come up with the Cyber Sachchata Kendra, CSK. And for the last 1.5 years, we have been having tremendous challenge to have the IT/OT segregation being converted into IT/OT convergence. So there, and I'm very happy that for the last 6 months, this IT/OT convergence, IT/OT segregation, the power utility gadgets, the industrial control system, the SCADA, the distribution automation, the AMR and the AMI, as far as smart metering is concerned, has become a board agenda. Now, the managing directors of generations and distributions are being given special training from Ministry of Power, and also the CISOs are upgraded with different training from NPTI and Ministry of Power. Now, as you have correctly asked a question that how we are protecting, firstly, we are preparing the CII and CCMP diligently. Secondly, we are having a homegrown team of ours having CEH, CISSP, CISA certified from ISACA. And they are constantly, because you know security is a journey and not a destination. So it's a continuous process for our DISCOM as well as for our generating stations. We are continuously monitoring through a SIEM-SOAR architecture where we have a stable security incident and event management along with security orchestration and automated response. So we are also coming up with an unified SOC because previously it was decided that the OT stations of generation and distribution would have separate SIEM SOC solution, and the DISCOM will have the existing SOC, and it will not be interconnected, or the IT system, ICT systems will not be interconnected. But later on, a decision has been taken that it has to be a converged environment, because we don't expect that the senior officials of any organization would always have two terminals. One is the exit terminal for the SCADA ICS system, and one is for the IT, having the email systems, the internet and all. So continuously, we are having stable antivirus system, the patching of the OS. We are very diligently doing all type of this bot, and this next generation threat protection is being done by the latest UTMs, latest firewalls, and we are having dual layer firewalling along with Cisco ASA. And also in the dynamic NATing and the static NATing part, we are becoming very stringent for URL filtering and all. We are becoming very stringent, and we are giving specific rules, specific access control list with specific IPs being given specific port access. So continuously we are fighting it out, and we are maintaining a proper ISMS ISO 27001 architecture, because we know that for IT we have ISO 27001, but we don't have any standard as of now for the OT part. So we are following the NACSIP standards and the IC standards. So that's what we are doing right now. Thank you.
Thank you for those inputs, Commander Sandeep Padam. I wanted to bring in your perspective on some of the areas which your co-panelists have spoken, right? And we saw that there are aspects such as risk assessments, doing proactive cyber maturity assessments, which are there. But when you talk about our defense forces, they have faced challenge in terms of cybersecurity investments because there has been increased focus on changing the infrastructure altogether. There's a transformation which is happening. So when you're changing your infrastructure from, completely, how do you safeguard? Because some of your systems will still be legacy and some of your systems are getting changed. And you also have to focus on increased capability of counter attacks against the identified cybersecurity actors.
Yeah, thanks, Kanish. So, the toughest part of this journey is always the transformation journey. So once you move from a legacy system to a new one, there is one point of time when both the systems have to coexist. So that is a time of most difficulty. That is a time when you have to be on your maximum guard, and that is the time you have to make sure that all the required steps are taken as per the SOPs that have been created. Now, talking about the investment part, Kanishk, as I mentioned before, that the cyber command that has been created is one step showcasing the seriousness that the defense forces have in giving due regard to this particular threat vector. And of course, but all of us will understand that this has come a bit late, but again, this is a step in the right direction. If we compare ourselves with our adversaries, so they are, they are at least 2 generations ahead in terms of their organization structure, in terms of the capabilities that they have garnered over the last a few decades. And but then again, so this is a good start. And again, the fact that we have started into this is again an indication that budget is not going to be a concern for this particular field, because again, the battlefield of the future will be complicated, and it will not only be restricted to the network centric warfare wherein all the sensors on a ship, multiple ships constitute a fleet. So input from the fleet is coming to a command center. In the same command center, input from a special forces operation running in parallel, or armored attack running in parallel, or a UAV attack running in parallel is coming. But also the fact that what is happening in the government sector, what is happening, say, in power sector and in financial sector. So the future of battlefield will entail monitoring all these realms as well. So it is going to be a complicated journey ahead. And again, we need to think about it holistically, and defense will play a crucial part of it, because the collaterals of a future war will be quite different compared to what we have been witnessing before. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sandeep Padam. I want to bring in Ravi. Ravi, Commander Sandeep Padam spoke about different kind of attack surfaces today, right? And all of those attack surfaces can be attacked together with different kind of cyber weapons. You come from a venture which is not just telco, but they also have investments in oil and gas. They've got investments in retail, and when an attack happens on such businesses, which also contribute significantly to our India's GDP, how do you look at response? Because these attacks happen not in silos, but they are targeted and they are well planned and complex.
I do see it as I know what your point is highlight, and that is very important. That's a preparedness is very important one. Here I can say that preparedness is very important one. And as a telco perspective, setting as an example and providing the opportunities. As you know that we are not just only telco, we are providing the digital services. And as a companies, the standards and whether there is a policy is there in the market, is there is policy coming from the government or not, and as the industry adopting, preparing themselves in advance is important. As Sandeep has earlier, some of our panelists has highlighted about the visibility is very important. If something happens in some other country, it may happen in our here as well. Last week itself, if you see that there is an outage in Facebook, the entire 6 hours, 8 hours, there is no, they gave the justification, but still there are so many unknowns. And yesterday also you do see about the couple of, in some circles, some outages, some people complained from Jio as well. there are unknowns are there. We have to prepare ourselves how fast we'll recover back. This will help only if we do the simulating a disaster scenario. I will give you an analogy because of pandemic and because of the remote working, all these things. Earlier, DR setup is a standby. Now, the strategy what we are following is DR setup is no more a standby. It is going to be active. Influence and mandate your IT teams and challenge them out of, let's say out of 1,000 applications, if they have 100 applications they plan for the DR BCP scenario, question them, challenge them, ask them to have active setups instead of have a standby. During the active setups, automatically we'll come to know that how do we recover back. If something goes wrong, how do we recover back? What is the backup, what data, how do we recover the data from the old system to running system to the new system? These exercises will prepare us and try to do about that tomorrow some ransomware attack happens or some different kind of state actor vector happens, how fast we can do about that. As you know, because of the cloud, because of the so many system digitization, handling and processing the huge logs is also biggest challenge. Whether we like it or not, we have to move towards the security intelligence and we have to bring AI, ML techniques to filter out the unwanted error messages and focus about that. And we have to demand our SOC teams or different expertise teams to do about that. Yes, I am getting a lot of huge data. Please help me to remove the unwanted traffic. This exercise, by observing some of the attack vectors, we should proactively take the initiatives. Yes, I want to monitor all the logs. Please remove the unwanted things. When we do the monitoring part, we do get capture from the OS, host related, applications related. We have to prioritize and try to remove the unwanted traffic regularly so that we have the dashboard view and collection is very easy. Why I'm telling this is important, the data is there. If the tools and responses are not on the prompt, if we don't know something is going around in next 15 minutes, next half an hour, next 1 day, then it is very difficult. We are afterthought. Instead of having afterthought, we have to do the due diligence and try to prepare ourselves so that we know something is happening, at least warning signal perspective, something is happening. The way our intelligence team is working about that, some outside actors, they're trying to target us. In the same manner, in IT systems also, we have to closely tweak the parameters such a way that we do closely monitor our parameters and critical assets. As I highlighted previously, critical inventory and the critical assets. And at the same time, giving the risk ranking. Giving the risk ranking and monitoring those things will prepare ourselves. And something goes wrong, so that, yeah, if something of course, I may not fully answering your question, but preparing ourselves is very important. So that if tomorrow something happens, we know and departments are aware of that, how to handle the situation politely, in a constructive manner. I will give an example. Let's say when lockdown has happened, how do we onboard a subscriber? Okay, the bread and butter is onboarding a new subscriber. Or the call center scenarios. There was no single day outage is not there from the lockdown to the other. The reason is we adapted ourselves. Okay, we introduced instead of eKYC, we introduced DKYC without compromising security. In the same manner, call centers, earlier call center is a closed group. They don't have to carry the laptops, they don't have to carry the mobiles, all these things, they have to work together. Because the reason is there is a lot of churn happens and there is a lot of outsourcing happens and they do handle a lot of critical data, personal PI data. So we have to proactively see about rethink the solutions with a fresh glance eye, okay, mask all the critical PI data so that they do the duty, they do to handle the tickets and they do serve the customer case. So innovatively looking about the solutions ahead in advance, that will give the preparedness to avoid any damage and isolating the scenarios like segmentation, network segmentation. If something goes wrong in one of the infrastructure, it's not spread to the other ecosystem. Take an example of Geo platform itself. If something happens in one system, it's not percolate to the other systems. Lateral movement, how control we do the lateral movement, what is it segmentation we are following across the organization. That is very important. These are the key points I can think about that to avoid or contain the risk within the boundaries.
Thank you, Mr. Kausar. Khalid, I wanted to bring you here. You know, there have also been attempts which have been made by the state infrastructure, right, the state governments on safeguarding states critical infrastructure, the financial institutions from cyber attacks. Right? We saw one such investment being planned by the government of Maharashtra. Do you believe more needs to be done by some of the other states in this regard, and it should not just be the central government or the enterprises? Because today cyber attacks not only impact businesses, it also impact consumer, it also impacts the state's public infrastructure, and there is a heavy penalty to pay. We saw the attacks which happened on the power sector during the pandemic, which were attributed to be state-sponsored attack. They had heavy implications for the states where the attacks took place, and Maharashtra was one such state where there were cyber attacks which were attributed to an international state actor.
As I had pointed out broadly in my introductory thing, that essentially wherever we are using any IT device, that particular thing is open to a cyber attack. Now, previously, people or nations used to fight battles and wars to demolish each other or to retard the development of each other. That age is long past. This is the age of cyber war, where if you want to shut down somebody's energy production or distribution network, you simply have to attack the software which is operating the things. I'll give you one example. Last year, I think, or last to last year, the India's biggest port, Jawaharlal Nehru Port, JNPT, in Mumbai, it was attacked by cyber criminals, leading to shutdown of 2 of 3 platforms. There are 3 platforms on which our entire things are taken out from various ships, and 2 of its platforms went out of operation for a very, very long time, impacting its balance sheet and impacting nation's own import. This is one example. Other panelists have spoken about energy sector, others have spoken about defense, our space program. In fact, there is no escape from technology. It has to come. A nation of 1.3 billion people cannot afford to do things manually. It has to be technology based. The moment you bring technology, you also bring interconnectivity. And interconnectivity is the weakest link in the entire thing. How safe is your interconnectedness? Be it bank, be it energy supply firm, be it a port, be it aerospace thing, be it a defense production unit, be it anything. We cannot do away we cannot do without technology, and we cannot do without interconnectedness. So issue is, how do we create our own security atmosphere or milieu, and for how long will we be dependent upon imports or some other person bringing and giving that solution to us? We have to generate solutions from within the country, which are safe, which are reliable, which are otherwise economical also, because then only you will see an economies of scale kind of adoption of such things. Now you are seeing a lot of theft of personal data. Metadata is being stolen left, right, and center. Every day, all of us are getting a lot of messages soliciting this bank loan or this sale of flat or this vehicle. What is this nonsense? This is nothing but actually breach of your privacy. That is one of the fundamental rights that we have under the Constitution of India. So to safeguard our life, to safeguard our property, and to safeguard our dignity, we must develop a credible system of deterrence, a credible system of protection of our infrastructure. Panelists have spoken about different sectors in which they are working and how they are making it safer. But let me tell you, the biggest sector which is being affected is general common people like you and me, who are not in their offices, but they are using their mobiles. We have our private data, we have our records of our purchases, we have records of our preferences, we have record of our websites that we are visiting, we have records of our transactions that we have done with banks and other things, the money that we spent here and there, and all those things. And not only that, with the CCTV surveillance coming up in a big way, I think almost all the big cities have huge network of CCTV. That means you are actually being tracked every moment. What happens to privacy? That is good for, detection of a crime when we seek that data. But the issue is that we have to have a policy, and we have to have a credible software base in our own country, not dependent upon foreign countries where we go and purchase things and bring it here and use it and that expires, to safeguard our life, property, and dignity. One is this. Second is that at the level of government or organizations where resources are involved, where huge amount of money or other things are at stake, then we need to have very high level of firewall system or some kind of thing which allows access only to credible people, recognizable people, people with proper credentials. Then only I think we can operate. We have a big system of nuclear, say, power stations and space research. In government, defense is a huge thing. The home ministry is having a lot of things. Commercial data in the commerce ministry, for example. I think everything, it is basically one architecture in which there are different bricks, but that architecture must not be dependent upon a foreign technology. That is what my personal feeling is. As of now, we are, I have to safeguard my say laptop, then I'll purchase something from which is a US made or somebody else's made. If I were a defense thing, then I would go to Israel or some other country to get something. Why we in India cannot produce such thing? That is a major challenge to our scientists, to our technicians, and we need to safeguard our things. Because in an event of a conflict of a war or a war, the technologies are prone to be misused by the supplier, and this has happened in history, and with not very back history, but recent history. So I think we need to develop that kind of infrastructure. And today, with the integration of more and more things coming, I think this challenge is becoming even more difficult, and especially with the amount of financial things, transactions which are taking place, the amount of money we are depositing in our banks and the keeping our entire life savings. I think at individual level, at the level of corporates, companies, or government, we need to be aware of this challenge, and we need to find credible solution to this. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Khaled. Dr. Pawan Duggal, we have seen that a lot of countries today have looked at regulatory measures, looked at cyber laws or cyber strategies or policies to take care of the areas, the aspects which some of the panelists have spoken. In India today, we see that our cybersecurity policy is still outdated. We don't have a cybersecurity strategy which is out there yet. The IT laws need constant updation. And we see some initiatives being taken for bringing in new IT laws to mandate platforms to follow laws. The intermediary guidelines came into the picture. What should be done next if we have to safeguard India's infrastructure from cyber attacks, and we have to look at protecting digital assets from different kinds of risk? What should be the next step you believe India should take to safeguard it?
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks to all the panelists for a very insightful and fruitful discussion. And I'm sure, as I mentioned earlier, we had 200 odd attendees watching this live, and some of the best practices discussed here can be emulated in their organizations. Thanks to all the panelists and Kanish for a wonderful moderation, and wishing all of you a good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you.